Hey. All right. Kathleen, did you start recording, or Cal, one of you start recording?
Yes, I did.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. This evening we are here to share with you all supports and strategies that you can use inside your home to support your students' phonics and phonemic awareness skills. And so to get us started, my name is Kelly Heiner. I'm the supervisor of ATSS. And to give you a little bit of background about myself, before coming to APS, I was a classroom teacher, a special education teacher, and a school counselor. And then when I transitioned to APS, I worked as a special education teacher again. I went back to my roots. And then I also served as a resource teacher for the gifted. And then I've also served as a teacher specialist within the Department of Teaching and Learning before taking on the role of supervisor this past fall. And this is almost my 12th year in education, and the work that Donna and I are going to be talking about tonight is very much a passion of both of ours, and something that we devote a lot of our time to, and something that, as I mentioned, is a passion and that we both love very much. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Donna McConnell.
All right, so as Kelly mentioned, my name is Donna, and this is my 18th year working with K-12 public education. I also started as a classroom teacher, and I've served as a reading coach, an instructional coach. I came to Arlington 6 years ago, and I was a reading specialist at one of the elementary schools before transitioning to the English Language Arts office, where I'm currently the elementary teacher specialist and reading specialist for the Department of Teaching and Learning. So as a reading specialist, this is something that I feel really passionate about, as Kelly mentioned, and we're super excited to share with you some strategies that you can use, particularly since you have so many opportunities to work with your students right now.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Kelly Krug. I'm the Elementary Director of Special Education. I am here to support and moderate tonight, so I would ask that everyone keep their mics muted. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the comment, and I will help ask Dr. McConnell and Ms. Heiner those questions as we go through tonight.
And Kathleen, did you want to introduce yourself as a member of the PRC?
Sure. Hi, everybody. And I especially would like the chance to thank Dr. McConnell and Ms. Heiner for working really hard on all of our dyslexia outreach and supporting reading in general in Arlington Public Schools, along with my wonderful supervisor, Dr. Krug. So we're delighted to welcome you all, and we'll look forward to sharing resources and information on the conference website. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So as Kelly mentioned a few moments ago, we just want to draw your attention to the following working norms that we will use as a group together this evening. So please ensure that your mics are muted throughout the presentation. It might be helpful if your camera's off as well to minimize distractions. And if you have a topic related question, please feel free to use the chat feature to post it. And we are hoping to have a few minutes for additional questions at the end of our presentation.
And just before we get going with content, please be assured that we are going to provide you with not only the session presentation, but a plethora of resources that you can use. So we'll show those here, but we'll also give you the link to all of these resources at the very end of our session tonight.
All right, so as we begin our time together this evening, we're going to ask that you participate in an analogous thinking activity to help Donna and I gauge how you all might be feeling as parents and or guardians in supporting phonics and phonemic awareness at home. So to complete this activity, you're going to choose one or more pictures that best describe how you are feeling in supporting phonics and phonemic awareness at home. And whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and place the number of the picture that's best describing how you're feeling in the chat. And if you're willing and would like to explain why you chose that picture, we would love to hear that as well. So we'll give you a moment to go ahead and to share your feelings with us via one of the 6 pictures on the screen. Oh, I'm seeing a lot of 5s. Oh no. I feel like I've been living a constant state of 5 since March 13th. So I understand and I feel you in every sense of the way. Some 4s, some 3s. We'll give a few more moments for any other remaining folks to share how they might be feeling about supporting phonics and phonemic awareness at home. All right, so it looks like we may have a little bit of a lull. So with that, we know that the thought of supporting phonics and phonemic awareness instruction at home can feel very daunting. But our hope is that the end of today or at the end of our session, you'll feel either as bright and optimistic as the rainbow in number 2, or perhaps as strong and confident as the surfer in the picture in number 1. Our hope is to provide you with a plethora of strategies that are easy to use and a wide array of resources that will really help you support this at home. So here is our agenda for this evening. A few moments ago, we shared with you the purpose of tonight's session, which is really to provide you with the practical strategies you can do at home to support phonics and phonemic awareness development in your child. During the rest of our time together, we'll discuss what phonics and phonemic awareness is. We'll discuss what the research says about why these 2 areas of development are so important. We'll spend some time talking about the role that phonics and phonemic awareness has in APS core instruction. And then we'll dive into providing you with some specific strategies you can do at home to support both phonics and phonemic awareness. And we'll close by sharing with you a resource document that will house all of the links and all of the activities shared, as well as the presentation itself, so that you have it to refer back to whenever is most convenient for you. And then we should end with, like I mentioned earlier, a few minutes for questions as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Donna, who is going to briefly share with you all about what phonics and phonemic awareness is.
Yeah, so we are going to dig in. We'll first start here with this theoretical model for skilled reading. And this content really is to establish a set of consistent definitions and terminology so we all know what we're talking about when we're talking about phonics and phonemic awareness. So as you can see by looking at Scarborough's reading rope, skilled reading is an incredibly complex process. And if you follow Louisa Moat, she often says that teaching reading is rocket science, and it's challenging to teach and it's challenging to learn. And so you can see the components that all must work together in strategic and automatic ways And when tonight's session is focused on those elements that are included in that word recognition strand that you see there in blue. We'll specifically be talking about strategies for supporting phonemic awareness, and then we'll talk about phonics and how to support working with sounds and graphemes at home with your students. And when we talk about strategies, they'll fall into a couple of categories. We'll talk to you about some that are more play-based and are going to fit kind of authentically into the day-to-day activities your students are engaging in that are not necessarily academic. And then we'll also show you some strategies that we commonly see teachers using in classrooms, so you can support and try some of those activities with your students as well. So we'll start first with phonemic awareness. And phonemic awareness is the understanding that spoken sounds are made up of individual sounds, and those individual sounds are called phonemes. And a student's ability to recognize, count, blend, segment, and manipulate all fall into a student's ability to, or a student's understanding of phonemic awareness, which falls under phonological awareness. And if you take a look at this kind of top part of what the full image is in hourglass, you can see that phonological awareness develops along a continuum. And the focus of the work that students do to develop phonemic awareness varies in complexity, even within the early elementary years. So for example, those skills that you see in the early category of working with syllables, alliteration, and onset and rhyme, those are usually developed in the preschool years. When we look at phoneme blending and phoneme segmentation, or taking apart words and putting words together based on their sounds, those typically develop in kindergarten and first grade. And then the more advanced phonological awareness work of phoneme deletion, substituting, and reversing sounds in words continue to develop until about the fourth grade. But since we're talking about our early elementary students this evening, by the end of first grade, students really should have a solid foundation in their ability to hear and manipulate the individual sounds in single syllable words that don't have blends in them. And when students have a strong foundation in phonemic awareness, it's incredibly predictive of later reading success. So when we take a look at phonics, these two terms are easily confused because they're very similar, but they're very different in terms of content. So phonics, there's really kind of two definitions for phonics. Phonics is the system of correspondence that exists between sounds or phonemes and letters, which we refer to as graphemes. It's also the term that's used when we think about an instructional approach to reading and spelling. And it's that approach that it very explicitly and directly teaches students the correspondences and the relationships between letters and sounds, and then they use that knowledge to identify or decode unknown words. And then they also use that knowledge of sound symbol relationships to encode or to write words. And phonics is developed primarily in grades kindergarten through second grade, although there are more complex phonetic principles and work with larger parts of words, such as syllables or morphemes, that continue to develop really across a student's educational career. But phonics, as we're talking about this evening, is very typically developed in kindergarten through second grade. So I'm going to pass it off for a little bit to Kelly, and she is going to talk with us a little bit about what research says about phonics and phonemic awareness instruction.
Okay, so before we dive into what the research says, I want to briefly talk with you about the term alphabetic principle, what it is and why it is important, as you will see that term come up in parts of the research that we're going to share with you. In thinking about children's reading development, it really is dependent upon their understanding of the alphabetic principle and the idea that letters and letter patterns represents the sounds of spoken language. So learning that there are predictable relationships between sounds and letters really allows children to apply these relationships to both familiar and unfamiliar words and to begin to read with automaticity and fluency. And really the goal of phonics instruction is to help children to learn and be able to use the phonetic principle. So at this time, let's take a moment to see what the research says, and we'll give you a moment to read each piece of research as it's presented on the screen. So as you can see by the research presented here, having a strong foundational knowledge in phonics and phonemic awareness is imperative for all children as they are learning how to read, but even more so for our students with dyslexia. So knowing this information, we're now going to share with you the steps APS is taking to ensure that all APS students, including those students with dyslexia, are receiving robust Tier 1 phonics and phonemic awareness instruction. Okay, so here on the screen, you can see some of the shifts that APS has been taking over the past year or so in trying to shift towards a more structured literacy approach to English language arts instruction. So as you know, change takes time. And so a transition like this to moving towards a more structured literacy approach is a multi-year effort, and that will continue across this year and in years to come. But we wanted to make you aware of some of the changes that have been made and are being made to the shift of structured literacy. And so you can see that all kindergarten and first grade classrooms use a very direct, explicit, and systematic approach to phonemic awareness using the Haggerty curriculum. There is a dedicated phonics block of time in each of our K-5 classrooms. And of course, when you get to the upper grades of 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, the word instruction looks different, as it rightfully should, where you'll see more of a focus of morphology and syllables. We've also adopted this year Lexia Core 5, which is an adaptive reading program that is based on structured literacy and really helps to pinpoint students' areas of growth in reading in all of the 6 main elements of structured literacy. In grades 3, 4, and 5, we have adopted a new universal screener called DIBBLES, and DIBBLES is as I mentioned, a universal screener that also provides a growth metric and progress monitoring. This year, Donna and I have been doing a variety of small group structured literacy professional learnings for teachers, in which I think we've had close to 300 teachers now at this point, if not more, as well as school-based administrators, in which we've gone into great detail of what structured literacy is, how they can incorporate it into their classroom, as well as specific lesson plan templates that really embody the elements and the principles of structured literacy. And as I mentioned earlier, this is an ongoing process, so there will be continuous structured literacy professional learning available to our teachers as well as our administrators as we continue to make this shift this year and in coming years as well. So now that we have that background, as to where we've been and where we're going. We have that knowledge base of what phonics and phonemic awareness is. We're now going to dive into looking at the specific strategies that you can use to help support phonemic awareness at home.
Perfect. Thank you, Kelly. So I'm going to start talking about some activities that families, parents, caregivers can use to support phonemic awareness at home. And as I mentioned earlier in the session, there are really two categories that I'll share with you tonight. Those that kind of fall in the language play category, and then those that fall under, I kind of termed it explicit instruction. It's going to mirror some of those strategies and activities that your students' teachers are likely using to develop phonemic awareness in the virtual classroom. And as we kind of work through these activities, both Kelly and I are going to be switching between presenting kind of in our current state, and we're also going to be using a dot cam. So just bear with that transition. It's a little wieldy, it's a little clunky, but we've practiced 3 times, so we feel confident that we'll be able to pull it off. But when we think about language play, we're really looking for those opportunities to engage students with phonemic awareness in a very informal, playful way. And very likely you've engaged with your students or with your children in these activities as they've been growing up. But I thought we'd specifically talk about how we might use oral games. I'll talk about a few where you can use your students' kind of love of playing with basketball, soccer ball, or a ball that you might throw. And then also if you have students who really are active and they're outside jumping and playing, you can really kind of seize that opportunity to reinforce and support phonemic awareness skills as well. I'll also will give you a summary of these activities in the parent resource document that we'll provide to you. So don't feel like you have to take notes or remember this information. We have it all compiled for you in one place. So we'll start with oral games. So oral games can be played quickly, they can be played easily without any materials. These are really great activities to play in the car, back and forth between soccer practice or doctor's appointments or whatever the case may be. So I'll share with you a few examples. So if we were supporting in kindergarten, rhyming is a really big phonemic awareness standard. Not only a student's ability to recognize that hat and mat are words that rhyme, but also the ability to generate a rhyming word. So if the adult says hat, the student could respond with mat, fat, cat, sat, etc. And so that's just a very simple way of an adult producing a word. The student generates a rhyming word and then continues to generate as many rhyming words as they can. And that is a very basic, very simple way to help students generate rhyming words. And for some students, it can be incredibly challenging. So this is a good way to kind of do that in a playful way. The second category is phoneme blending. So phonemes are those individual sounds, and the ability of students to blend sounds together is critical skill when we're talking about when we add those graphemes and students start to decode. So we want to build that skill with just sounds very early on. So an adult might say the sounds, and then the students are going to put those sounds together and say the word. So it might sound like this. So the adult would say, ah, t, and then the student would put those 3 sounds together and respond, hot. And so a more advanced word might be m, r, ch. And the student would respond by saying march. So the students are hearing those individual sounds, they're holding on to those individual sounds, and they're able to put them together to form a word. And that's how we support blending. Segmenting is also critically important, particularly when you're thinking about your students writing or encoding. They have the word in their head and then they have to produce those graphemes. So the ability of a student to break a word, an oral word, into individual phonemes is a critical underlying skill that we can support through segmenting language play. So in this example, the adult says the word, student then breaks the word down into individual phonemes. So it's almost the reverse activity of the blending. So it might sound something like this. The adult would say fish. The student would repeat the word and then break the words apart. So it might sound like sh, fish. The adult might say dart. The student would respond art, dart. So they're taking that word apart into its individual phonemes and they're putting it back together. So they're segmenting and then they're blending it right back together. And then the last oral game I'll share with you is a game that supports phoneme manipulation. And manipulation is one of the harder phonemic awareness activities. And so it's really helpful to work with students to manipulate these individual sounds. And so when you're working with students in manipulation, you're going to produce a word, but then you're also going to change something about that word. And for our youngest students, we typically start by manipulating the first sound, the first phoneme, and then we'll move on to those ending phonemes, and then we'll also work with some manipulation of that middle vowel sound. So an example might be the adult says fish. Change the f to d, and the student would respond dish. A second example that's a bit more complex and it manipulates that final phoneme, the word is march. Change ch to k, and the student would say mark. So you can see how those oral games increase in their level of complexity, and depending on where your student really is sitting on that continuum of phonemic awareness can really help guide you when you're thinking about which oral games to play. And your teachers are going to be really your best source of information to identify, like, where are they? What skills should they be working on at home? What skills can I support? And we'll talk a little bit more about engaging with teachers around these two components later in the session as well. The second kind of playful game is those that you can do with balls. We can start first with balls that you throw. And this is a very simple game that you can play with students, simply throwing the ball back and forth. If you have multiple children, they can all engage. We do this with you can do this with entire classrooms full of students when we're together. But you simply throw the ball back and forth. Each time, perhaps you might say a word that begins with sh, and then every time the ball is thrown to someone, they produce a word that begins with the sh sound. And you can take that same game and you can apply various phonemic awareness tasks to that. You could have them generate rhyming words, generate words that have the I sound in the middle, or words that end with ch. There's a whole host of activities that you could do with just kind of tossing the ball back and forth. Another that's really fun is if you have avid basketball players or soccer players, is to use their dribbling to mark individual phonemes. So parents, you can produce that word, they can dribble one for each sound and then shoot to blend the full word. And this engages them not only with phonemic awareness, but also with the skills that they're already practicing with the sports that they And then last but certainly not least are for these students who love to be outside and kind of are bouncing around. We can really kind of take that opportunity to engage in some phonemic awareness support. You can do this without marking on the ground, or you could draw a series of 3 squares or 3 circles. You could also place hula hoops on the ground. But simply you would say a word and the student would kind of hop their little body as they say each sound. So you might say cat, and they would take 3 hops. Each hop, they would be producing one of those sounds, k, at, and then blending that word back together for cat. So as you can see, those are super simple ways to engage your students with phonemic awareness that are critical in laying that foundation for reading proficiency in ways that don't feel like school, in ways that are embedded in kind of the natural cadence of their play. But we know that also families are looking for, how do I support some of the activities that teachers might be doing, or how do I provide some explicit instruction to my students to reinforce what the teacher is doing. So I'm going to switch to my dot cam, and we're going to see how this goes. And I'm going to show you 3 activities that you can work with your students with at home. All right, Kelly, I'm going to ask for a verbal confirmation that you can see my kitchen table.
We can.
You got it.
All right. So I'm going to share with you 3 different activities. And the first I'm going to show you is using a blending mat, which again will provide you a copy of. The second is I'm going to show you how to use manipulatives to blend and segment words. And then we'll layer in the third, and that's a combination of Elkonin sound boxes and manipulatives to represent sounds in words. So the first kind of pro tip that I'll share with you, and teachers have learned this the hard way, trying to come up with words to work with your students on the fly is not a great idea. You will have the most trouble imaginable coming up with words that start with T when you're put on the spot in front of children. So my advice is prepare your list of words ahead of time, and you might even count the sounds and put them in parentheses, kind of as I've done here. So I'll first start by showing you how to use a blending mat. So this is a blending strip, and it's simply designed to help students and provide a visual scaffold for students to kind of mark the different sounds in the words as they blend them together. So as the adult, you would give students their target word. So we'll start with the word top, and students would simply touch the blending strip and then blend together. So the word is top. The student always repeats the word top. T, a, p, top. So we'll do another one that's just a little more complex. It has a digraph on the end. The word is fish. Ish, fish. And then I'll do one more that's a bit more challenging. It has a long vowel in the middle that's represented by multiple letters when we see it. But since this is phonemic awareness, we're not looking for letters, we're listening for sounds. The word is light. L-I-T, light. So this blending strip is a really heavily scaffolded way to help students start to mark those individual sounds and then remind them to blend them back together. Because anytime we pull words apart, we want to always put them back together with students. The second strategy that I want to show you is a strategy that is fairly simple, and you can use manipulatives that you have. I chose Unifix cubes because I believe they came in the primary learning kits that students received. You could easily use Legos. You could use pennies, quarters, anything that you have lying around the house. I just use these Unifix cubes because you have them in your learning kits. So with manipulatives, it's much like the blending strip. You produce the word, the student repeats, and then students can move with each sound, or they can touch for each sound. Different students have different preferences about what they like to do. You could also, with these cubes, they actually link together, so you could link them together as you do that work. So I'll model this for you. I'll do some 3-sound words, and then I'll also do a couple of words that have 4 sounds. So here's what this would look like. So the word is fig, ig. The word is dip, d, I, dip. If you have a student who likes to push their cubes, they're often doing that in the classroom. And let's add that 4th, and I'll show you what that might look like. So the word is beast, b-e-st, beast. Or the word is crop, k-r-op, crop. And so oftentimes marking with manipulatives is a great scaffold for students. If you want to add a layer of complexity to this, instead of pushing or segmenting, you can change sounds and ask students to identify which sound is changed. And so this can be really tricky for students, but let me show you what I mean. So I might say The word is mat. Your new word is map. What sound changed? And you would want students to indicate that the final sound changed. So you might say top. Your new word is tip. Which sound changed? It's this middle sound that changed. So they're listening for that change in sound, which is really helpful when you start into phoneme manipulation. And then the last activity I'll show you is a combination of manipulatives and sound boxes. So the fancy term is Elkonin boxes after the person who created them, but most folks just call them sound boxes. So another kind of pro tip here is be mindful of the words you choose so that you have enough boxes to fit the sounds for those words. And this particular chart has several, so we can kind of move in between. But I'll show you what this might look like. We'll start kind of easy with a 3-phoneme word. So the word is, but it's a hard word. The word is throw. Throw. So the student is moving the different manipulative into the box based on the phoneme, and the box here just gives that additional scaffold. Because when we see the boxes, that signals to students this word is going to have 3 sounds, and so then they're just simply marking the sounds. And we have a PDF of Elkonin boxes for you in your parent resources, so you can use that. But more simply, you can draw some boxes on a paper with a black marker, which is my go-to as a reading specialist, just super quick. And that's an easy way to make that happen at home as well. So I am going to turn it back over to Kelly, and she is going to have a conversation about phonemic awareness. As soon as I find my cursor, there we go. All right, Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to you. Kelly, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now I'm going to share with you a few different activities you can do to support phonics at home. So remember, phonics is the study of relationships between letters and words, or I'm sorry, letters and the sounds they represent. So as Donna just shared with you, you noticed that she wasn't working with any letters as she was making the sounds. Everything was auditory. So now with the phonics piece, we're bringing letters into the. And so these activities are geared towards providing code-based, explicit instruction with many repetitions, something that we know our students with dyslexia greatly benefit from. So we'll start with looking at an activity called Vowel Intensive Work, which you can see here on the left-hand side of your screen. And then I'll show you 2 other activities, word building and word chaining. So starting with vowel intensive work, I am going to switch to a document camera. So give me 1 second to do that. Donna, can you confirm that you can see my camera?
Yep, I see your vowel tense.
Okay, great. All right, so starting with vowel intensive work. So during this activity, students are practicing their short vowel sounds that have already been taught, the short vowel sounds that they're currently working through. So if your child is currently receiving OG, this is an activity that they're probably very familiar with. So for those vowel sounds or those vowels that your students have already been taught, you can create a vowel tent, which is just a folded index card that you can see here. It's just an index card folded in half. If you don't have index cards at home, you could use a sticky note. You could create just like a little, I don't know, like a little perhaps sign where you would just glue or tape a popsicle stick underneath it. You could use construction paper, you could use scrap paper, it doesn't matter. And so what you'll want to do is, the way that this works is you as the parent are going to say the sound is ah, and your student and your child would look for the vowel tent that matches that sound. So me as the student would hold up the ah tent. Another example might be me as the parent, I would say the sound is I. The child repeating the sound I, hold up their I vowel tent. You can increase this in complexity as you progress into perhaps a vowel consonant pattern. So for example, you as the parent could say ig, and the student would repeat the sound ig and hold up the I vowel tent. Another example may be the sound is Oz. The student would repeat the sound Oz and hold up the O vowel tent. You can increase it an additional layer of complexity if your child is ready to follow a consonant vowel consonant pattern. Let me show you what I mean. So you as the parent would say something like hob. The student would repeat hob and hold up the O vowel tent. Another example might be zig. The student would repeat zig and hold up the I vowel tent. And to help you with the creation of the nonsense words that help to make up the complexity of this activity, we have a pre-made list for you that is part of the resource document that Donna mentioned a moment ago. So you won't have to worry about coming up with your own nonsense words. We have a list available to you to help you practice that. So now I'm going to show you the second activity, which is called word building. And the way that we're going to do word building is through a say, touch, and spell. And what you'll do is you'll start by dictating a word to the student. The student's going to say each sound in the word as they place a manipulative, like a either an index card, a sticky note, a piece of paper, anything that has the letters on them, and to represent each sound in the word. So for example, if you were to say as the adult, fin, your student should move the letter tiles or index cards, F, I, and N, and as they're putting down each letter, they're going to say the sound of the letter. So for instance, if I was the student, as I was putting fin down, I would say I, N. And then at the end, to help with blending, I would bring my finger underneath and I would say fin to help blend the letters together. Another example might be if I was to say the word fish, the student would then say I, sh. And what you'll notice is that SH is together on one index card or one tile or on one piece of paper. And this is because they make one sound. And we call two letters that make one sound a digraph. So an example of a digraph might be SH, as you can see here, CH, the ch sound, TH making the th sound, or CK making the k sound. So that's something that you'll want to be aware of as well. The next activity I'm going to show you is word chaining. So With word chaining, it's really a great way for students to practice phonetic patterns. It gives them the opportunity to manipulate sounds in words, and it gives them the opportunity to practice reading words. And so word chaining really is just a sequence of words that can be built by changing one sound at a time. And it's very important. I just want to reiterate that it's just one sound at a time. So let me show you an example. We could begin with the word, let's begin with the word at. I would have my child say the word. They could sound it out, they can tap it, they can, as they spell it, they could write with their finger or trace with their finger and say at. And then what I might do is I might tell my child, all right, close your eyes. And as their eyes are closed, I might add the C. And then I would tell them to open their eyes and say, what is the word now? And they would say cat. And then I might say, all right, close your eyes again. I'm going to add a new sound. I'd have my child open their eyes and they would say cot. And again, depending on the level of scaffolding and depending on the level of need, you could have your child just blend the word, or you could have your child practice spelling the word by tracing with their finger and saying C-O-T. You could have them practice saying the sounds as they write with their finger, k-a-t, cot. So there's a lot of ways that you can build in various supports depending on the needs of your child. One tip that I would highly recommend doing if you're going to do some word chaining activities with your child is to plan out the chain ahead of time. So for instance, let me show you. If we were to continue on with that chain that we started with at, you could continue on to cat, cot, hot, hat, pat, pan, and then lastly ending in an, ensuring that you're only changing one part or one sound of the word at a time. And the reason why I would highly recommend that you plan these out ahead of time is that you will quickly find yourself with 3 or 4 letter words that you probably don't want your 5-year-old repeating or saying. So I would just highly recommend planning them out ahead of time so that you can quickly have your students work through them. All right. So with that, I'm going to head back to the PowerPoint. Donna, can you confirm that you can see my screen now?
Yes, I can see your slide.
Perfect. All right. So another important skill that you will want to practice at home is high frequency words. And high frequency words, or red words if your child is receiving OG, are trick words. And what we mean by that are these are words that cannot be sounded out because they break the phonetic rules of English language. So while practicing spelling high frequency words or red words, it's helpful to say the letters as you write them and make sure that you're not saying the sounds, because you can remember they can't really be sounded out. So in order to gain mastery of these types of words, it really is ideal to practice the reading and spelling of only maybe 2 to 3 red words at a time or high frequency words at a time, especially for our students with dyslexia. Our goal is mastery, not just exposure. So we'll really want to make sure that we're being really thoughtful with the amount of words that we're exposing to our students and having them work through. So once your child feels comfortable with reading, spelling, and applying these words correctly in a complete sentence, then you can begin to introduce perhaps new high frequency words or red words. I would just make sure that you are working in conjunction with your child's classroom or special education teacher if you're considering practicing new words at home, so that we can make sure that that it aligns to the instruction that's happening at the school. So practicing spelling and reading these words in a variety of ways is really instrumental for our students with dyslexia. You can see on the screen a number of different ways that you can make spelling these types of words fun. If you use 3D glue or something like Benderoos, so the 3D glue here in picture number 3, or the Benderoos in picture number 2 to create word cards, you're going to want to ensure that students are spelling the words aloud and tracing each letter with their finger as they say it. So after you've created the cards, so I'll use 2 as an example. So after your student has practiced writing or spelling the word with the glue for 2, you can keep that card and reuse it for practice. So whether you're driving out to dinner or driving to the grocery store or driving to school in the morning, you can perhaps keep these in the back seat and your child can practice them on their way to school or wherever. And what you'll want them to do is when they're spelling the word like to, they would use their index finger and trace the T and the O, so to really get that additional kind of tactile multisensory experience. So as they're spelling it, they're engaging that feeling in their finger and activating a wide array of multisensory experiences in their brain to help them remember the spelling and how to read the word to. Some additional ideas that you might have or you might want to consider are perhaps using pipe cleaners to formulate the words. Perhaps if your child is in OG and to help with the continuation of the idea of red words, you may decide instead of using glue that you see here on the index card, perhaps you use the red yarn pictured here. And you use the red yarn to glue down to an index card or a piece of paper, and that becomes the word card for your student to practice. And just like with the Benderoos or the 3D glue, students can trace their finger along the yarn to get that additional tactile multisensory experience. Another way that you could practice these multisensory experiences with high frequency words is to play slap it. And so you can cut out some of the high frequency words or put them on sticky notes and place them all throughout your home, whether it's the bathroom, the front door, the refrigerator, wherever the case may be. And periodically throughout the day, maybe before dinner, on their way to wash their hands, you can have them say 1 or 2 words that they're working on and have them slap the word, say the word, spell the word, and just have that additional opportunity to practice. One thing that I'll draw your attention to is Donna and I have pulled the list of the most commonly used high frequency words, and we've given that list to you. That's part of the resource document that you'll have access to, so you'll know all of the right words to practice. And for those students who are receiving OG, this is also the list from OG, so you'll have that continuity as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Donna, who's going to talk about how to use text to support phonemic awareness and phonics instruction at home.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to talk about 2 kind of different categories of text, and the reason that they're useful with supporting or for supporting your students. And I'm going to also make connections. So if you think back 45 minutes ago, we started with that theoretical model for skilled reading, Scarborough's reading rope. So I'm going to make those connections too, so we can really see the importance of students using a variety of text to become skilled readers. So we'll first start with talking about decodable readers. And so decodable text are those books that are controlled for specific phonetic principles. Just like we teach phonics along a continuum following a scope and sequence, these books are written to follow a very specific scope and sequence with the purpose of providing students with practice in connected texts with those phonetic principles. And so when students are learning to read and they're really learning to crack the code, they benefit from practice reading texts that include multiple opportunities for them to encounter the phonetic principle that they're learning within the context of a sentence. These decodables are used during instruction, and they are really good for beginning readers or students who are still developing their phonetic principles to practice reading on their own, because they're controlled. We know what kind of words they're going to encounter, and it really discourages bad reading practices, such as looking at the picture to decode or using the context to decode. And we want to really ensure that students are using their knowledge of the alphabetic principle to decode those words when they get to them. And decodables really give us a great opportunity for students to do that work. But they're not the only type of text that students should be reading and listening to. The other type of text students should be reading, and when I say reading, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're reading them on their own, but they should be in books that are of interest to them. No one likes to read a book that someone's forcing them to read. Everybody wants to read the books that they want to read. So having a student having some voice and choice in the selection of books is critically important. And this means that when you're reading at home with your student, you're very likely reading a text with them that is not controlled for phonetic principles like a decodable reader would be. And that's completely appropriate to just read to them and to tell students words that they may not yet know, and that when they see a word that they're not familiar with. The most important thing when you're reading with students at home is that you're spending time together reading. And when you're doing that and you're having rich conversations about the things that they're learning in those nonfiction texts, or the struggles of the character, or the problems the character's having, and those connections to their own lives, what you're really doing is developing the language comprehension strand of the reading rope. So tonight's session has really focused on that blue word recognition strand with phonemic awareness and phonics, but there's a whole nother set of components that are critical to skilled reading. So when we think about verbal reasoning, we think about vocabulary, understanding of how books and genres work are all critically important to skilled reading. And that's the work you're doing when you're curled up with your students enjoying a good book together. So we do want students in decodables when they're learning to read to give them that practice, but we also want them reading and enjoying books that are of interest to them to foster those other language comprehension skills. So that when those strands are all weaving together, that we're working towards that skilled, proficient reading.
Okay, so as we wrap up in these last few moments, we wanted to bring your attention to the parent resource document that we've been referring to all evening. And this is really where we've tried to organize all the materials, documents, and activities shared with you today. So let me go ahead and show you quickly what this document, let me make it a little bigger, and what this document has for you. So you will find a copy of our presentation. You will find various articles that we think are beneficial in helping grow your understanding of phonics and phonemic awareness. You can find that high frequency word list that that we referred to earlier, that word list, that red word list from OG. You can find access to that document here. Another document that we've created for you is a list of questions that you could ask your teacher, your child's classroom teacher, or special education teacher at parent-teacher conferences. We know those are right around the corner, and so we wanted you to have some questions to dig deeper into the phonemic awareness and phonics skills that that your child has. And so we have a list of questions that you can engage with your child's teacher with. After that, we have a variety of resources that we've included from partnerships with the University of Florida Reading Initiative, as well as another resource that just has really wonderful resources for parents. We've also included directions and guidance for each of the activities that we shared this evening. So you can see a list of all of the guidance for the phonemic awareness activities that Donna shared. You can see a description of the activities for supporting phonics at home that I briefly shared, and then some additional high frequency or red word work that you can do at home. And then lastly, the last thing on this document is some access to some decodable readers. So Donna was just talking to you about the importance that decodable readers have in practicing the phonetic principles that our beginning readers are practicing. And so these are a great opportunity to engage with your students in or your children in decodable text. And so we encourage you to utilize these resources as well. So with that, it is 7:01, so we've gone about 1 minute over, but we'll be able to stay on till about 7:05, and then both Donna and I have to sign off. But we wanted to thank you for your time. We're so incredibly grateful that you decided to spend your Friday night with us. We'll just wrap up with bringing your attention to 3 additional sessions that APS is offering as we celebrate Dyslexia Awareness Month. We have 3 other sessions, and I think a few others that aren't included on the screen, but the most immediate sessions you can see here. So we encourage you to attend those sessions as well. We thank you for your participation, and we hope that you all have a great school year.
Thank you, Donna and Kelly. What an amazing presentation with so many wonderful resources for our families. There is one question in the chat from a parent whose child is not taking to some of the physical strategies, and she is wondering if you have any suggestions on how her child might be able to engage more in some of those physical tapping out strategies. And I know it's hard on the fly without knowing the student. The first thing that comes to me is if the tapping isn't working, relying on the manipulatives. And sometimes tapping on the table is kids like to do the fingers in the air. So those are a couple that I could suggest, but I'm not sure if you guys have other ideas.
Yeah, I know I've worked with students in the past, particularly if they have like dexterity struggles, like it's really hard for them to kind of move their fingers independently of one another. If you think about bigger body movements, that can sometimes be helpful. So instead of tapping with your fingers, so you can like pound your hand to like your fist to your hand. Students can clap or students can jump because, you know, I'm not sure, you know, why that your student particularly doesn't like those, but whatever physical activity he likes, you might capitalize on that and see if there's a way to incorporate kind of movement that he likes into his encoding work, and see if that might be helpful.
Or if he's embarrassed, maybe a light tapping on the leg underneath the table or something where, you know, no one else might see, but it can help him segment those sounds out.
Yeah, I particularly working with older students, I find that that is a very common experience, and so I think that 2 things. I think that as a district, I think we're trying to incorporate more multisensory techniques to where, because it can benefit all students, not just our students with dyslexia. So as we begin to change that narrative, we hope that it becomes sort of the norm for a lot of students, because it's just a great strategy to take apart words. I would say the other thing, similar to what Kelly said, is sometimes when it's, you know, tapping on the hand when you hold it up, or, you know, the pounding if he's receiving OG and kind of pounds the table. I think you actually mentioned he's receiving Wilson, so he would be doing the finger tap in the air. But I think the suggestion of just taking his hand and tapping his knee underneath his desk, no one will see it, no one will know, and I think it's just sometimes really helpful. Sometimes just using the pencil and tapping with the pencil. There's a wide array of things that he can do. Because right, you don't want to draw attention to it, and you don't want him to feel embarrassed or feel like, you know, there's to draw any attention to it. So yeah, there's a lot of different options that you could explore. That's kind of a hidden agenda.
And I thought of one more thing too. Working with secondary students, they have their pencil in their hand because usually when they're tapping, they're also writing. So they can use tally marks or draw like little dots in the margin of their paper, and it simply looks like they're writing. So it doesn't appear as if they're doing anything other than writing, which is what everybody is doing. So it's a way to minimize the attention, but still give students that input of making a mark or performing some kind of a physical motion for each sound to help with the encoding.
Thank you, ladies. I think we are at the end for tonight, but we so appreciate your time tonight, and we so appreciate all of our families who joined us tonight. We hope you got a few strategies to use with your students and your children starting as early as this weekend. And this recording will be up on the dyslexia website in the next few days. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.